All right, I'm going to upload another case tutorial. So this is another patient that we're doing for this AAID All-Star course down in Mexico. I'll put a link to the course, the virtual sign up for that. I think it's really valuable. And then also check out my courses on my website at coryglenn.org. But I haven't opened anything with this case, so you're going to see this from ground zero. What I'm told is it's going to be implants from 6 to 11 and basically get as many implants in there as we can. So we're going to have to do wax up. We're going to use facial scans, all of that fun stuff that I always do for these cases. I'll try to do everything, so I think this will be useful to you. So again, I haven't opened anything with this. I'm going to start just by going to Blue Sky Plan. We're going to open up the CT, and I know I've got to do a wax up first, but it'll be helpful to go ahead and get the software going on doing the bone segmentation. So just putting in the patient's information. This with the new version 5 is a new step that you've got to do. It's going to help track your cases better. This is going to be for an upper arch, and we'll go ahead and do the data import. So again, this is fresh to me. I see that they've done a scan with a denture. I assume that's a partial since it's 6 to 11, and without. So always open the one without first. Go ahead and limit your field of view down to whatever you're focused on. And now I could go ahead and import intraoral scans and stuff right now, and the software will auto stitch that. I'm going to just open the CT for the moment, and then we'll come back. I can always do that at a later step. So for right now, I'm just going to close this. I don't really need to do all of that stuff just yet. Just for the heck of it, I'm going to cut out this little bit of noise down here. And I can see that there's a fair amount of scatter with this, so sometimes I'll go ahead and play with this and get where it's a little clearer view. All right, so right off the bat, what I'm going to do, just because I'm going to go ahead and start on my wax up, I can do that in exocad just to utilize my time best. So I'm going to go to segmentation. I don't even know that I need to do bone segmentation, but I like to do it, so I'll start this auto segmentation. I'm going to let that run in the background, and in the meantime, I'm going to open up this case in exocad for the wax up. All right, so again, it's 6 through 11. For right now, I'm just going to call it an anatomic ponic wax up. And we'll go from there to there, save that, and we'll jump into the design. Okay, so a lot of data in this case. It wants the upper jaw first, and then it wants the lower jaw. And I'm going to go ahead and set the orientation for right there. So that's interesting. This is quite a class 3 that I'm seeing right here. So I'm actually interested to pull in the scan with the denture. So I'm going to jump over to Expert, Tools, Add and Remove a Mesh, and we'll call this a pre-op scan. That's fine. So let's bring in the upper, which does have that it's not stored relative to the data, and so I should expect to have to stitch this. So we'll go to Align Mesh, pick 3 common points, and then perform alignment and let it best fit match. Alright, so obviously where the partial is, that's going to be different data, but we should expect to see this if they're good scans, that you've got a lot of blue showing a good match. So that's great. We'll click OK. And the reason I wanted to do that is I didn't honestly trust this stitch, but it does look like, in fact, this patient's that much of a class 3. It could be that this is more of an acquired bite. You know, the patient's only got these 2 teeth that they're biting against, and so they might just be pushing forward just to create the ability to get some teeth together. I don't know, since I didn't capture this data, if it's eccentric, but we might ultimately have to redo this for the prosthetic with a good centric bite, because we need that to be dead on and centric. But for our purposes right now, we'll go ahead with this. I'll jump back to the wizard. Oh, you know what? There's one other thing I want to do. I believe that they've got facial scans here, so I'm going to try to bring that in as well. Actually, I may be lying. They may not have captured that. It's just the folder was labeled that way. Okay, so there's not facial scans. I do have some pictures that were provided. Again, I'm just working with what data was provided to me. Doesn't look like there's full face. So that would be ideal if we did have full face photos, but we just simply don't. But I still find that to be a little bit helpful to see that in place. But what I don't know, because I don't have a facial scan or a full face photo, is I can't see the interpupillary line to know, is this smile canted? I'm going to be somewhat guessing at that. All right. So, I expect this will probably have to get refined when the prosthetic is made, like the final, but we're going to do the best we can right now. All right, so let's cancel that. We're back in the wizard. I'm not going to do a gingiva design for right now. It might become clear that we need to do one later. Let's pick our library. I'm going to use the HD teeth. And then we'll go ahead and click where these teeth are going. All right, so that's been dropped in. Let's go to next. And if in fact this is the right bite, we're going to clearly have to stretch these teeth out quite a bit to get them out there. And this is where it can be kind of useful to look at, the pre-existing prosthetic that they've got. I'm looking here at how far facially those extend. And those, these current centrals on the partial are way too small. I mean, I'm just looking at that relative to the lower incisors. So for sure these teeth need to be larger, and they're by necessity going to be larger, just given the fact that they've got to extend way out here. And then we're going to need to bring this down Although I don't necessarily want to create a bunch of overlap and overjet. If this really is the bite, it's probably going to need to end up in more of an end-to-end relationship. And looking at the blue, I'm not nearly as facial as what these teeth are in the partial, but remember they're using a bunch of pink acrylic and stuff that I probably am not going to get away with on just more of an FP1 style prosthetic. So I could potentially bring that out just a little bit more. Let's go to simple and try to fine tune this a little bit. So at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm trying to look at symmetry. The number one thing that's going to jump out to your eye if they're off is the centrals. So the facial surface and the incisal surface of those centrals need to be on the same planes and really lined up well. All right, so I've got the sizing approximately correct. And again, it will be end to end. I'm probably in the next step going to end up bringing out this this incisal edge just a hair, and we're most definitely going to need to do some plasty on the lower, right? Bring that corner of this tooth in. Be really helpful if we could do some ortho on this, but I just don't think that that's going to be a feasible thing to pull off. Alright, so overall this looks relatively symmetric. Need to tip this one out a little bit. Okay, that'll work for an initial setup. And now we can start doing our more localized tooth movements. So what I'm going to do for starters is lock the equator, and I'm going to grab the necks of these teeth. Clearly these have got to be long teeth, right? I haven't really made the determination yet of are we going to require pink on this or not. I'm going to at least try initially to do this without adding pink. So that being the case, I need to stretch these teeth up and make them longer. Again, there's a lot of questions I'm going to still have, just given the fact that I don't have a facial scan or a full face photo. That is to me one of the absolutely most critical things that we can get. I just don't have it here, so we'll probably have to refine this and redo a few things when we get down there to Mexico and are actually working on this case. Let's get the necks of those pulled back. All right, that's better. We're not going to be able to generate that much of a papilla, so I've got to close some of these embrasure spaces. I'm going to freeform and smooth out some of this stuff. Alright, so I need to know about lip line and stuff to even know what to do up here with these gingival levels. I can make big long banana teeth if they don't have any high smile line at all. Like if it's never going to show, we can do that. It'll be an aesthetic compromise if they raise their lip. But what I don't know most of all right now that's limiting me is any kind of a reference for midline, occlusal plane, and as if you're functioning as the lab, labs deal with this all the time. They get not enough data sent to them, and so if you can get that data, do it, because that's much more precise. But we don't have that currently, and I don't have time to get it. I'll have to refine this when I'm down there. But what could I use? Jumping back over here to Blue Sky Plan, we're now done with the segmentation. And so while it's not perfect, you could look at this. If you had that maxilla in the exocad case, you could actually look at this and know, hey, that's a pretty close reference for their skeletal midline, which will be close to their facial midline. So I need to get this maxilla over into exocad. But the challenge there is, what am I going to stitch that to? All right, because currently there's no common data. I don't have bone landmarks here, and the segmented teeth are not accurate enough to stitch to this. So what could I do instead? Well, what I could do is come into Blue Sky, and I could pull in this upper intraoral scan. All right, let's see how it does with auto stitching this. All right, it looks like it's pretty darn close, but I always need to verify that. So I'm going to start by just turning off everything except for that maxilla and that intraoral scan that I just brought in. And I want to check the stitch. So I'm going to look right here in the axial slice, and that's what I should see, is that pretty tight adaptation around teeth and STL model. And again, all of these teeth appear crowned, so that makes for a difficult stitch. But I know it's really, really close. I'm going to also look in my cross section. And again, lots of restorations, but I can look at this outline and tell that that's a really good adaptation. Is it perfect? I don't know. There's too much scatter, but it's got to be close. And then the other thing I'm looking at is occasionally you'll see little air pockets right here. That dark black is obviously air, and then the lighter color is going to be the tissue outline, and that looks pretty darn close. We could look at it maybe back here as well. I think I saw an air pocket. But when you're trying to deal with a hard stitch in high scatter type situations, really a good idea to pack their cheeks full of gauze or cotton rolls or something to create those air pockets, because now you can not only depend on the tooth outlines, which are swallowed up by scatter, but you could also look at these tissue outlines. I've got just a little bit of an air pocket here, but it looks like that's tracking along it. Okay, so I'm going to somewhat trust this tentatively. And now if I was trying to bring that maxilla into Blue Sky, or I'm sorry, into exocad, what I could do, since these are stitched now, I could export the two of these together, pull them into my exocad case, and stitch the intraoral scan to the intraoral scan, and that will orient my maxilla. So that's what I'm going to do. I want to export these together so that the software sees them as one STL file. So I like to, from the start, because you're going to have multiple duplicates of all of these, but they're all saved in orientations for that particular program, right? These now have been moved and stitched in Blue Sky. So I like to make a folder that is just called BSB aligned files. That's where I'll dump everything, because ultimately I want to pull everything back to Blue Sky Plan. And we'll call this maxilla and iOS. So with that done, now it's going to make it relatively easy to pull those into exocad. We'll just call it a generic visualization mesh. Alright, so here's that. And now we need to stitch the two. Remember, this is the same scan, it's just these are the ones that this has been tied to, this one has been tied to the maxilla. So let's align them. And that's what we should see, because they are the same scan. It's just now it's drugged this maxilla along with it. Okay, something else you can do under Add Remove Mesh, you can generate a plane. And so I can get myself pretty symmetric and oriented here if I align this. So I like to just do this manually. So if I'm hovering on this mesh and I hit the control key, oops, I don't want to do that. I just want to do this one. All right. I want to get this somewhat squared up. Now, what do I have as a reference for a horizontal plane? I don't have an interpupillary line. But if I was guessing, I would think that these infraorbital nerves are going to be pretty well symmetric to the face. So I'm trying to square that up. And that to me looks pretty square with the jaw. If I'm looking right through that flat plane. So that would serve as an interpupillary line. And now I'm just trying to reference occlusal plane. And this occlusal plane is all over the place. I'm going to be limited with what I can do there. But again, I'm just trying to have some kind of a reference. And then when I'm trying to visualize my midline, I'm going to just more or less use right through here as my midline. You know it's going to be close. It may not be exact, but your incisive papilla, your nasal septum, all of those should be pretty close to the facial midline. So now when I turn these back on, again, this is not perfect, but I'm looking for symmetry. I wouldn't want this incisal edge hanging way down below that plane relative to this one. And it looks like just eyeballing it, we got pretty close there. It's a bit of a reverse smile line, but that we're working with what we've got. These teeth are super erupted. You know, it's a difficult situation. Midline though, if I'm looking straight down this, I'm close, but I think this midline needs to come over just a little bit. So I'm going to grab this entire tooth, pull that over just slightly. And now my midline looks pretty close. Doubt it's perfect. Doing the best I can though. Alright, so with that done, all of that was really just to try my best to approximate the incisal edge length and the midline of 8 and 9. Once I've got 8 and 9, the rest of this, I'm just filling in the gaps pretty much. So I'll go ahead and maybe time lapse this because I'm going to just try to fine tune my tooth positions now. Alright, that's relatively close. I don't at all like how inclined these teeth are. And, you know, if they have to go out that much, it might be that this has to be a locator retained restoration that snaps in place and does have a lot of pink. But again, there's just so many questions I have not having a facial scan or something like that, or pictures. So for right now, my biggest concern is getting them in the ballpark for purposes of implant planning, and I think I can be close enough for that. Okay, so we're gonna call this good enough for the moment. Say that I want to smooth out. That corner looks pretty harsh to me, and I think this corner needs to come over just a bit. All right, it's good enough for the moment. Let's go ahead and adapt this. We're going to cut in a static occlusion. We're going to cut in the basal. And again, my best guess at a midline is pretty close. Overall occlusal plane is close. It's symmetric enough to this. And so this is probably the best I can do with the information that I have right now. Okay, so now the challenge is going to be getting this back over into Blue Sky Plan. Alright, so watch how I do this, because a lot of people don't realize this is an option. Alright, I'm going to take just my Waxup, I'm going to export it. Let's save that into my Blue Sky Plan files. I'll call it initial Waxup. Now I'm saving it here, but it is not currently aligned to Blue Sky. Alright, always go back to your original coordinate system of the data. Now how do we get that into Blue Sky Plan in the right position? I'm going to grab that file, and I'm going to drag that Waxup in. Don't try to stitch it, because there's nothing to stitch to. Alright, so you see that Waxup is sitting over here in space. How do I bring it back? Well, if I exported it back to the original alignment, I have already aligned it in Exocad to this. So what I want to do is I want to pull this back to its original orientation with my green model here. So in model manipulation, take your initial Waxup, and we want to align it to another model, and our destination model needs to be that upper intraoral scan. Not using points, don't check that, and watch what happens when I click OK. Alright, and now it's in place, and now it can be used for planning the implant positions. Alright, hopefully that made sense. So our Waxup's in place, we've got bone segmented. Now let's start planning implants. So I'm going to go into advanced mode, add an implant. I'm going to guess we're probably using a Blue Sky Forte. Let's just start 4.3 by 13. I'll put a big long custom abutment on here, and let's just drop it in place. So have your model outlines turned on so you can see the Waxup for orienting this, and that's a massive ridge, so that actually works in our favor. Alright, hopefully you can see here what I'm doing. I want to be kind of in line with the long axis of each individual tooth that I'm dealing with, and sometimes getting it in the ballpark is easiest if you just do it in this 3D model. So I'm trying to visualize where would I have the long axis of this tooth be, and about right there is probably a good position. And now we can fine-tune it up here. I'll usually use the axial slice. So given this class 3, my position probably needs to be coming just lingual to that incisal edge, or right in the incisal edge. Because if anything, I imagine the incisal edge position is correct, and if we can get them back further eccentric, which I don't know yet, maybe this mandible will drop back some, but we don't want to be here, come way lingual, and then have this big ledge on our restoration. So I'll go right there. At a minimum, that should be in the cingulum area of this. And now depth of placement, I'm trying to visualize, you know, if I want to match these contours to this, The facial can't go any further out. Alright, so I'm going to have to create a nice running room from platform out to here, which means I probably need to be just a bit more subcrustal right there. Lingual we can fudge a lot more. I think right there. Probably going to use the same implant size over on the other side, so let's just duplicate it. So I'm just watching how rotating this is affecting it. That put it close to the long axis. And now I'm going to fine tune up here. Ridge is skinnier, but still good size ridge here. We'll keep some decent bone on the facial, and again, depth of placement. I'm imagining developing this running room out to this purple contour, and I think that's doable right there. Alright, now generally the way you would approach a case like this is implants at canines, centrals, do 2 bridges. I'm going to start by placing a couple in the centrals. It's possible that we could stick an individual crown on every tooth. I think that's a bit overkill, but you know, in a huge ridge it might be feasible to do that, and it certainly gives you a lot of options as far as backup. That is a really inclined implant. Alright, there's my incisive papilla or canal. I want to give a little bit of clearance off of that. Alright, now if you tried to go right at the crest with this, you don't have any room to generate that running room right there. So I think this needs to go deeper, because I'm still not convinced this won't end up a more of a locator style restoration. Alright, so I do want to come just lingual to that incisal edge, knowing that we can put our screw access hole in that lingual surface. I'm looking right here at the incisive canal. Maybe we can upright just a bit and come a bit closer, just in case we decide to put one in the lateral. And while we're right here, let's go ahead and duplicate and stick one just to the other side of the canal. So you can see right here that exclamation point that tells me I'm too close together. Alright, once that goes away, I know I'm at least 3 millimeters apart, which would mean it's okay to put adjacent implants in there. Alright, you see where both of those are emerging. Depth needs to go just a bit deeper and tilt out just slightly. So we could look here in the maxilla, and I can tell that's going to be difficult to get implants in the laterals. I can see that already. We could try it just to see what happens, but I'm doubtful that that's going to be an option. Alright, my spacing, it's giving me the warning that I'm too close together, but that's up here at the apex, which is not nearly as big of a deal as if they were too close together at the platform level. Once it's down deep in the bone, that's not too much of a concern. But there, just that movement made those warnings go away. And now I'm almost certain I don't have the room to put one here in the lateral, but we'll try it just for the heck of it. We'll go with a 3.7 by 11. And you can see there's no good way to do this and have adequate spacing between the implants. I would need to get all these on the same depth level. So I'm just curious, let's measure from here to there. You know, maybe it's feasible. It's right at 3, but I don't love that option. So I personally think it would be better to not do this. So I'm going to remove that. I think it's a better option here to go with 4 implants. And bear in mind, I am not committing to do, I'm going to go ahead and make a guide, but before I ever commit to having someone use this guide, we're going to go back, verify centric, pictures, the Waxup, see if that changes things. It may or may not, but if it doesn't, at least I'll already have a guide made. So hypothetically, if this could all stand as is, now I'd be ready to make a guide. Alright, so here is the ridge where those would go. Let's turn on the guide tubes. I'm going to do this without metal sleeves, and so my hole diameter I changed for my printers to 5.1. Guide tube height, make whatever, because it's going to trim it to wherever it hits on the gingiva. And the standard offset would be 8.5. Alright, go ahead and apply that to all of them. And once I've done that, you can see I just don't have a lot of guide tube that's going to guide me up above the gingiva. Now yes, a flap is going to be done, but you know, your other option here is you could raise the guide tube up. Alright, so these are currently 13 millimeter implants, meaning if you use the standard offset, then when you're drilling, you're going up to the 13 millimeter drills. You've only got one drill beyond that, which is the 16 millimeter drill. So let's say maybe I wanted to get my tubes up. I could raise my offset 3 millimeters and then go to my 16 millimeter drill to get to the depth for these 13 millimeter implants. Alright, so that would be 11.5 instead of 8.5. So I'm going to change that. And then as long as they're visible and unlocked, you can just say apply to all. And you see that that gave me a lot more of a guiding surface. Now you have a little bit of the wag factor, right? So ideally we'd like to keep those guide tubes as close to the implants as possible, but you've simply got to have enough sticking out that they're useful. So what's the other way that we could control this? Since we've moved our guide tubes further away, we could increase the height of all of them. Alright, I mean, I can make this 10 millimeters if I want. Alright, and then apply that to all of them. Because ultimately what the software is going to do is it's going to trim these guide tubes back to wherever they meet this guide, or that intraoral scan. So even though they've been raised up, having a longer guiding surface that engages that built-in key is going to keep me on track. So I think that's what I would do initially here. Again, all of this is subject to change. So with that done, I'm ready to go ahead and make the guide. I think a tooth supported guide is going to work just fine here. And so let's generate the automatic curve. And I screwed up. Rookie mistake. You see what model I have indicated to draw the curve on, and thus it drew the curve on my maxilla. So I need to go back and clear that. And let's just hide that maxilla because we're not going to make a bone supported guide for this. Alright, let's regenerate the automatic curve. I don't want it to resolve collisions. Remember, I've already made manual alterations, so I don't want to be warned about that. So that's a decent automatic curve. I'm going to go ahead and clean it up a bit. Just to give it more support, I'm going to pull these pretty far down on the pallet because we're not going to make a palatal flap. It's not like that's got to be flat back for this guide to seat, and since we don't have any teeth in the anterior there, I want as much support as we can get. So for a case like this, usually what I would do is generate the guide, and if we were going to use it, I'd go into the surgery, I'd seat the guide, and I'd use an indelible ink stick to mark the osteotomy sites on the tissue. And then once that's done, I'd remove the guide, and my incision would go just lingual to the marks that were made, full thickness all the way around, and then into this sulcus, into that sulcus, and I'd reflect all that tissue to the buccal. So it would be a lingualized incision, and that's ideal because that's going to give you that gap where you're not getting primary closure after you've got healing abutments on, and it's going to force that gingiva to granulate in and create more keratinized tissue and give you a broader band. We can certainly use the tissue being thickened up on this buccal too, if in fact we're going to have to jump out that far with our implants. Alright, so this would be my curve. I'm going to go ahead. We'll throw in some windows here. Windows don't need to be huge. We're just looking to expose some cusp tips just to verify complete seating. Doesn't even have to be the entire occlusal table. I could just maybe knock out this buccal cusp. And I'll probably by default get some small windows right here, and if not, we can always add those in. So let's create the guide. Okay, so I thought that the automatic brush would open up a window here, but it's just shy of being able to do that. So I'll just manually cut in some windows right here. If I was going to do that, I'll usually take the guide and make it a bit transparent so I can see the model underneath, and then just use a cut tool. So I could swoop in here, open just a small cut. So now I've got a little window there. Alright, so now we've got a seating window on all of those teeth. If you wanted, you could open up one here as well. That's just as easily done with the handpiece though. I'm not going to bother with it. Alright, so we'll call this good on our guide. And now, again, you see my tubes extending through here, but if I now go and hide my guide tubes, remember the software it knows that should not impinge into the tissue, so it's trimmed that back. The actual guide, even if you were to do this flapless, which I wouldn't recommend, the actual guide will not impinge in there. And so we'll probably take a handpiece and trim this back more so that we can lay a flap, we can reflect all this buccal, and then the guide will actually kind of hold the retraction of the flap. So now that I've got that done and I can see, I might even just go ahead and do an initial cut to minimize that. So I don't really need anything beyond where it's going to enter into the tissue. So let me make one more cut. Okay, we're going to call that good enough. Last thing I would do is make a drill report. And I need to make a note for whoever's going to do this. recheck the bite and the Waxup aesthetics, verify that it's eccentric, all of that stuff, and then I'm going to put in there to make sure that they understand you need to go to the 16 millimeter drills because I've raised the offset. Alright, and you can see the drill report will have little cross-sectional shots of each implant site. I want to go ahead and save this in that patient's data. And then be sure to save the case. And that should do it. That's as much as I can do on this case right now, but hopefully you see the value in having more data. Always take facial pictures for anything full arch, for anything in the anterior. Make sure you've either got facial pictures or a facial scan, or both preferably, because man, there's so many things I just don't know if this is going to be, you know, the ideal plan until I verify that, and that will get done. So don't think that this is the final plan. It could be that we use this, it could be that we trash it and go tweak some things, but anyway, hopefully you just kind of see the overall approach of how I did that and picked up a few little tricks. Alright, if you're interested in courses, check out coryglenn.org. Sign up for this on the virtual attendee course. I think you'll learn a lot with that, and we'll see you on the next one.